We can see things are absolutely black and white, but the Russians will convince you that it's grey. I mean, that is how they operate.
We are living in a situation where there will be constantly different propaganda attacks that we will face.
It's NATO's job to ensure that the Russians don't come any further westwards. It's our job to make sure that he's put off from doing that.
I don't believe that it would be a nuclear war. I believe it would be a conventional war. But Putin thinks that he can win a conventional war. That's why he's up to his neck in it.
To challenge NATO, that would be probably his biggest and deadly miscalculation.
Conducting reassurance missions with the Lithuanian partners and with the current situation in the world, deter a potential threat. And the tactical scenario is a defense. So if push comes to shove, this is what we're here for.
We showed the whole time, also during the Iron Wolf exercise, that we are always ready to defend Lithuania. And together with our partners, once again, it was really a brilliant exercise to show that all NATO partners can work and can fight together.
First of all, to consider is what Putin has said in the past. And but Putin really wants to recreate the old Soviet Union, the USSR, which included countries like Ukraine, like Lithuania, Latvia, Romania. And I know there is a great concern by Lithuanians that they are sort of next in line. We know that there are massive exercises planned by the Russians and the Belarusians in Belarus next month. And there is a huge build-up, 120,000 plus soldiers. Now, let's turn the clock back to November 2021, when the last combined Belarusian and Russian exercises took place. It was then in February that Russia invaded Ukraine from the north, from Belarus. So with the build-up happening at the moment in planning for this big exercise in November, then absolutely, there could be a move north out of Belarus towards Lithuania. So I think that is something that hopefully the West, having been caught on the hop last time, will not get caught on the hop now. And I think it's something very salutary for people in this country and the US to understand, is that those Baltic states like Lithuania, who abut Russia, absolutely believe that Putin could well expand his operation. And if he sort of fails in Ukraine, for his own longevity, he's sort of got to do that. So I think we've got to be absolutely on the balls of our feet to make sure that he doesn't. And of course, the main positive here is Lithuania is a NATO country. Therefore, NATO, and hopefully led by Britain and France, need to make it absolutely clear to Russia that we will pile in, we will prevent Lithuania being attacked by Russia. So yeah, there's a lot happening at the moment, and as everybody is focused on this summit in Ukraine, we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of potentially what's happening in the area of the Baltic states.
On my side, I wouldn't even repeat the Russian propaganda cliches that are in the book, because this is the whole idea, to actually make it more visible as a kind of para-historical interpretation of how Lithuania was not occupied by Soviet Union, how actually the history is related in Soviet Union kind of interpretation, and then so on and so on. The main point is that this is somehow now viewed publicly as something of intrigue, something interesting, something new, because such kind of propaganda pamphlets were distributed about Ukraine before the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. They are continuing this like that. But in essence, books like that are a regular long-term Russian, basically, propaganda strategy vis-a-vis its neighbors. So basically, the authors that you can see in this book they constantly, regularly publicize such kind of books about Latvia, about Estonia, about Lithuania, and so on. One of the guys, Dukov, is head of Kremlin-linked kind of a think tank which constantly produces those books. The other guy is the guy who basically ran away from Lithuania because he is being prosecuted, and he's now writing books, from outside Lithuania about Lithuania and so on. So basically, this is the background that I would consider this as a kind of a traditional Kremlin's storytelling of how independent states after the collapse of Soviet Union are not so independent, how Soviet Union was kind of a great story, and how unfortunate that Soviet Union collapsed, and so on and so on.
The signs would be troop movements. We would look very carefully at what is happening in Kaliningrad, in that enclave. We would look very carefully at what's happening in the Baltic. Above all, we would look very carefully at what is happening to the communications between the Baltic states, each other internally, and also to NATO headquarters in Brussels. Any interference of communications would be the first sign that something serious is happening. A movement of troops, of rockets and weaponry close to the border would be another indication. That would be very, very serious. It would be the first stage of a more general war in Europe. I don't believe that it would be a nuclear war. I believe it would be a conventional war. But Putin thinks that he can win a conventional war. That's why he's up to his neck in it in Ukraine. So these are the warning signs, and I have no doubt that MI6, our secret intelligence service, even as you and I are speaking, are monitoring these events with the greatest of care.
We have such kind of books being published on a regular basis from Kremlin about Lithuania. So it needs a deeper interpretation and deeper understanding of how this propaganda effort is a constant effort, being pursued by Kremlin. That would be maybe my main kind of a point, that it's interesting from a social researcher perspective to see that the things, those kind of books that we constantly have been seeing being produced now, when the year is so tense and the crisis is looming and so on, those books are being interpreted in a bit of a different manner, right? So I would maybe point to this direction. We are constantly under the flood of Kremlin's kind of a propaganda narratives, and they can be very different. They can be parahistoric, like this book. The other narrative can be for example, that Russian speakers are, being persecuted in this or that region, be it Baltic states, be it Europe. The other narrative could be that it's a constant Russophobia and so on. The point being that it's a constant kind of chatter of those different propaganda narratives, but from Putin's perspective, like it was in the case of Ukraine or elsewhere, he can, when he has idea or a kind of military aventure, he can simply cherry pick from the variety of different propaganda, stories to back up his, maybe aggressive action and so on.
Well, Russian propaganda and disinformation is legion, and a lot of people, without knowing it, are actually swamped with it virtually every day. You only have to be on social media, and when I write columns for the Sun or the Telegraph, half the comments I get are from Russian bots who are spreading disinformation and propaganda. This is absolutely how Russia operates, and people need to be very aware of that. Just because somebody has an English or a French name doesn't mean to say that they're actually not a Russian sat in Moscow trying to spread this. So this is almost 50% part of the Russian way of warfare, is to psychologically prepare the sort of mental landscape, if you like, so that people or the Russians try and get people to understand why actually places like Lithuania should be part of Russia and not independent democratic states, which those people have voted for. And that is why it is so important that the West and the free world, democratic world, stand up to the Russians, because Putin, if he had his way, would subjugate the whole of Europe. And he has very clearly said he wants to reclaim those old Soviet states, and NATO, which is, and it's NATO's job to ensure that the Russians don't come any further westwards. It's our job to make sure that he's put off from doing that.
I don't see this book being a kind of a template for such kind of potential aggression. I see in many cases maybe other templates that could be used as this. I think now there is this discussion on the eastern NATO flank whether Putin could decide to check something. I think this is quite different from the Ukraine situation back in 2022, when they didn't have those kind of a solid security guarantees that we all have in NATO. It's a totally different game to challenge NATO. So I think we are living in a situation where there will be constantly different propaganda attacks that we will face. I think the most important thing is not to show kind of a weakness and a lack of will on NATO side and on our ally side, Brits, Germany, and so on, to show the weakness from the military perspective, the weakness from defense perspective, for maybe Putin to think that this could be his opportunity and so on.
The Russians do all the time. We can see things are absolutely black and white, but the Russians will convince you that it's grey. I mean, that is how they operate. It's all part of the whole psyche, Maskirovka, which is all about deception. It's how they operate. And Putin was a KGB agent. He was Secret Service. It's in his psyche to try and manipulate and deceive. And the Russians are very good at it. It's important, I think, that governments around the West and people like me call them out for it and make sure that people who are absorbing all this information realize what is fact and what is fiction. And unfortunately, an awful lot of stuff that comes out of the Kremlin is fiction, designed to change people's perceptions and trying to cloud what Russia is actually trying to do, which is to attack old Soviet countries that have had their freedom and democracy now for a couple of decades. And from what I understand, none of them want to return to the Soviet Union or the Russian Federation.
In respect of NATO, I think we are quite well mobilized in our own defenses. I am not on the skeptical side here with this, because I think a German brigade presence, and there was just recently the inauguration ceremony that we had in Vilnius. is puts Putin under really big dilemma. I don't think he can escalate the crisis in this direction. I think there are other options like be it Georgia, be it Moldova, be it other places where he can organize chaos and destruction. But I think to challenge NATO, that would be probably his biggest and deadly miscalculation. If you are constantly living with such kind of neighbor like Putin's Russia, you have to be constantly be prepared. So that means that you should turn your kind of anxiety into practical positive action, and this is how those constant drills that we are doing, our preparation drills, are just making in essence us stronger and discouraging any military adventure. So I think this is important part. I mean, as Ukraine showed, if you show your resolve, if you show your readiness, then this is the best way to actually kind of discourage any potential aggression and military action. So the way Ukrainians showed this in the first weeks of Putin's offensive, made him recalculate, replan, and so on. So I think he should really double think on testing NATO resolve.